I was lying in my bed, awake and restless. Just before that, I was sleeping deeply, but something startled me awake. And I knew exactly what it was. It was my father snoring. His snoring was so loud that, even with both our doors closed, I could still hear him from the other end of the hallway. It was the same thing every night, and I felt like it was getting worse and worse. I turned onto my side and looked at my phone. Great. It was 2 a.m., and in 4 hours, I would have to get up to go to school. How could I get any rest when my father snored like a bear every night? I had to fall back asleep. So, I covered my head with my pillow to try to ignore the noise. But every time I started to fall asleep, I loosened my grip and the pillow fell off the bed. I put on my headphones, but I could still hear him snoring. After 30 minutes of enduring those awful noises, I got out of bed and walked down the dark hallway. Despite my frustration and exhaustion, I didn't want to wake him suddenly. I loved my father, and besides, it wasn't his fault. So instead of barging into his room and telling him that I couldn't sleep because of him, I gently knocked on his door and opened it. "Papa!" I whispered, poking my head through the door crack. At that moment, the snoring stopped. I sighed and continued, "Sorry to wake you, but I can't sleep. Could you try turning over so you snore less loudly?" I paused, waiting for his response, but he didn't say anything. He just kept sleeping, completely unaware of anything. But it didn't matter. At least the snoring had stopped, which meant I could finally get some rest. I went back to my room and gently closed the door before collapsing onto my bed, and ended up drifting back into the arms of Morpheus. But a few minutes later, the snoring started again. This time, they were even louder and more aggressive. It was as if they were snoring right behind my door. Oh shit, I said to myself, okay, I think I'm going to go downstairs and take a sleeping pill. I got up again and then I opened the door. And there I saw his silhouette. He was standing still, but he was still snoring. I couldn't believe it. Now on top of snoring, he was sleepwalking. Since I hadn't turned on the lights, it was really dark, so I had to be very careful not to startle him and wake him up. I didn't want to see what happens if you wake someone during sleepwalking. When my hands touched his shoulders, I gently led him back to his room. Once I was sure he was lying safely in his bed, I closed the door behind me and headed to the kitchen. I took my sleeping pills from the cupboard, swallowed 2 of them, and gave a satisfied smile. Now, even if he started snoring 4 times louder, it wouldn't matter at all. I was sure I'd sleep like a log. I went back up to my room and lay down on my bed. I felt my eyelids getting heavier and heavier as I stared at the ceiling. And just as I was about to close my eyes for good, I remembered that I hadn't set my alarm, so I grabbed my phone. That's when I saw that I had a new message on my voicemail. I wondered who wanted to tell me something, so late at night I dialed the voicemail number and heard the robotic voice coming from the receiver.
You have a new message. To listen to your message, press 1. To change your greeting, press 2.
To access more options, press.
I pressed button 1 before she could finish her sentence. According to the automated voice, the message had been sent around midnight. At that time, I was still fast asleep. The message was sent.
Hey son, it was just a message to tell you that tonight I'm going out with some of my colleagues, and I don't think I'll be home until very late. But well, I guess you already are.
I dropped my phone before the end of the message. I was petrified and I couldn't move. If my father wasn't at home, who did I hear snoring at the very moment I was thinking that? I heard the snoring coming from inside my room. But now, I know it's not snoring, but growling. Several years ago, my family and I went on vacation to Cape Cod, and my parents had rented a small house where we were supposed to spend 2 weeks. Would you have chosen? There was the kitchen, the living room, and the bathroom. The bedrooms were on the 2nd floor, and in the basement there was a washing machine, a dryer, a couch, and a television. On the first night, a terrible scream from my sister's room woke us all. My father hurried in and switched on the light. he found my sister sitting on her bed, screaming and crying. My parents sat next to her until she calmed down enough to explain to them what had scared her. She told them that she had been woken up by a foul smell and that when she opened her eyes, she saw something horrible. She said there was blood all over the floor, bloody handprints on the wall, and lots of little blood stains on the ceiling. We all thought she had a nightmare, but we couldn't convince her. She refused to stay alone in her room and wanted to sleep in our parents' room every night after that. One night my mother was preparing dinner while my father had gone shopping in the next town. My sister and I were in the basement watching television when suddenly the light bulb above us burned out, and the television turned off without warning, leaving us completely in the dark. The basement was never fully finished. Its old stone walls created a heavy atmosphere. For a few seconds, we just stood there, petrified, not knowing what to do. And then, a nauseating smell appeared. The odor was really horrible and made me feel sick. It smelled like a mix of garbage and rotting fish, and the odor kept getting stronger and stronger. We started to hear a kind of scratching sound, like something was scraping against the wall or the floor. We screamed and started running in the dark to reach the door. We managed to get out while calling our mother for help. We did our best to tell her what we felt and heard. Finally, my mother went to the basement to replace the light bulb and make sure everything was normal. She grabbed a flashlight and a new bulb, then disappeared into the darkness of the basement while we waited anxiously at the top of the stairs. I thought she would come back up quickly, but it felt like an eternity before she did. Suddenly, we saw her emerge from the darkness and run up the stairs. She slammed the door to the basement shut and turned toward us. Her face was completely pale, and her eyes were wide open. And all she could say was that she didn't want anyone to go back down to the basement. Then, she walked to the kitchen and called the police. Listening to her, we realized she saw someone in the basement as we waited for the police. We stayed huddled together in the living room, staring at the door. At any moment, we expected to hear someone trying to open the door. My mother, on the other hand, didn't answer, even though we kept asking her what she had seen downstairs. When the police arrived, my mother led them to the basement door. She opened it. They went into the darkness, flashlights on, and weapons ready. They searched the entire basement, but found nothing. For your information, there was no other way out of that basement except the door. There were no windows, nor any other doors. Since they hadn't found anything, the police left, and my mother finally decided to tell us what she had seen downstairs. She tried to speak in a calm voice, and told us that as she was about to change the light bulb, she smelled the horrible odor that had been described to her, and then, just like us, she heard scratching noises. She then swept the room with her flashlight, and that's when she saw something between the washing machine and the dryer. It looked like a man. He was crouching, his clothes were stained, his hair was messy and tangled. His face didn't look human, and was twisted into an expression of pure rage. When he raised his head to look at my mother, the flashlight's beam reflected in his eyes, and they shone like those of animals in the dark. He started moving toward the wall, and it was as if he disappeared. My mother didn't have time to see where he went, but she didn't really care, because right after that, she dropped her flashlight and started running as fast as she could out of the basement. When my father came home, we told him everything. And luckily for us, he decided that we wouldn't spend another single night in that horrible house. What it was, we'll never know. On the other hand, I can tell you one thing for sure. It definitely seemed dangerous. So, if you ever hear something scratching behind your wall, be careful, because you might not be as lucky as we were.